The county assessor had already tied a red closure tag to Red Mesa Ferry when June Ransom stepped onto the landing and cut it loose with her pocket knife. 20 freightmen watched from their wagons. Across the Pecos, Harlan Price smiled without showing his teeth. 30 days, June said. Give me 30 days before you hand my crossing to him. Elias Boone looked at the red strip in her hand, then at the ferry rocking against its timber guides. You don't own this crossing yet. I know. You're the mechanic. I know that too. Boone checked his pocket watch against the courthouse clock beyond the adobe roofs. The county recorded 6 freight delays in 2 months, he said. 2 cable stoppages, 1 damaged ramp, 3 complaints about irregular hours. The ramp is repaired. Today, it's repaired. Boone glanced toward Harlan Price. Price stood beneath the shade roof beside his toll road sign. Clean brown coat buttoned despite the heat, a small notebook in one hand. My road is open every day, Price said. No current, no cable, no operator deciding whether a wagon moves. June looked at him. Your road adds 11 miles. It stays on land. A few men laughed. The Pecos moved brown and heavy below them. The haul cable hummed whenever the ferry shifted. Wade Mercer sat on the front wagon of a 6-team freight string, one boot against the brake board. He had waited 40 minutes and looked like a man who counted wasted time and wages. June knew his name. Everyone hauling freight between Red Mesa and Fort Stanton did. He was 36, broad-shouldered, sun-darkened, and known for delivering what he promised. He was also watching her like he expected this to fail. Boone said, "What are you proposing?" June slid her iron measuring rule from her belt and ran her thumb along its worn edge. 30 days, posted hours, posted load limits. Every delay and safety stop written publicly. You time the crossings. You record breakdowns. At the end, if Red Mesa can't meet the county standard, give Price the freight contract. Price closed his notebook. And if it can, then you stop calling this ferry temporary. The landing went quiet. June had worked Red Mesa 5 years under 3 operators. She had repaired its cable wheels, rebuilt its western guide, patched its toll office roof, and trained 2 men who later called themselves ferry masters. The county had never put her name on anything except payroll. Boone studied her. How much of the repair cost are you carrying? All of what's left. Wade looked at her more carefully. Boone said, 30 days, beginning tomorrow at sunrise. I set the standard. Fine. No special allowances. Maintenance closures count against you. June's fingers tightened around the rule. Fine. Boone took the red tag from her. Then Red Mesa gets 30 days. Price wrote something down. Wade climbed from his wagon. That doesn't help my freight today. June turned. You're Mercer. So I'm told. You've got canned goods, flour, lamp oil, and machine parts. His eyes narrowed. You inventory every wagon? I inventory weight. He looked toward the ferry. I'm not putting 6 loaded wagons on that deck because you won an argument. I wouldn't let you. That stopped him. June walked to his lead wagon and studied the stacked crates. First wagon is overloaded by at least 600 pounds for today's current. My manifest says otherwise. Your manifest doesn't know how high the river is. Wade removed his gloves and folded them once over his belt. Suppose I want to cross anyway. You take Price's road. Price smiled. June pointed toward the deck. If you use my ferry, redistribute the first wagon and bring them across 2 at a time. That adds handling. It keeps your machine parts out of the Pecos. Wade stared at her, then turned to his crew. Move 2 flour crates to wagon 4, oil to wagon 3. Split the machine load. Price's smile vanished. The first crossing took 11 minutes. Wade timed it himself. June stood at the east control wheel, one hand near the brake lever, while the cable pulled them through the current. She watched the ferry angle, the guide rollers, and the water pushing upstream. When the deck touched the western landing, Wade checked his watch. 11, June said. Price's road takes an hour and 20 if your teams are fresh. He doesn't stop when the river rises. Neither do I, unless the river gives me a reason. That sounds like an operator deciding. That's exactly what it is. His mouth shifted, almost a smile. By sunset, all 6 wagons were across. Wade's freight had lost less than an hour. June had gained the first entries in Boone's trial book. 11 minutes, 10, 12, 11. No incidents. Before Wade left, he looked back at the ferry. I'll give you 1 week. 1 week of what? My freight. You make it sound generous. It isn't. You make me late. I leave. Fair. He nodded and rode west with the last wagon. June watched until the freight string disappeared into the evening dust. Then she returned to work. Her assistant was supposed to take the western night check. He never arrived. At 11:40, June crossed alone, inspected the west break housing, tightened one guide bolt, then returned east with the empty ferry under the stars. She expected the western landing to stay dark. Instead, a lantern appeared. Wade stepped from behind the freight shed. You forget something? June called. My crew is camped a mile west. That wasn't my question. He lifted one shoulder. Figured I'd see how your night system works. At midnight, June checked the brake pins, cable temperature, and watermark. Then she pulled the east bell rope once. The brass note carried over the Pecos. For several seconds, nothing answered. June looked across the black water. Then the western bell rang. One clear note. Wade had chosen to stay. By the 6th morning, Wade Mercer had stopped checking his watch every time the ferry left the landing. June noticed, because she noticed everything connected to Red Mesa. His wagons still arrived in clean order. His men still moved quickly. But Wade no longer stood beside the ramp counting minutes under his breath. He watched her instead. Not constantly. Just when she changed a load, stopped a team, or leaned over the east housing with her measuring rule. That bothered June more than the watch had. Harlan Price answered Red Mesa's early success by cutting his toll rate almost in half. His new sign appeared beside the upstream road before breakfast. Low freight rate. Dry crossing. No delays for water. June read it from horseback. Price stood beside the sign with his notebook. You'll lose money at that rate, she said. For a while. How long is a while? Longer than 30 days. She understood. He did not need to destroy Red Mesa. He only needed to make using it look foolish until Boone's trial ended. June turned her horse toward the landing. Price called after her. Roads don't need courage, Miss Ransom. She looked back. Neither does a ferry. His eyebrow moved. Judgment is different. She rode away. That afternoon, Wade found her changing the operating board beside the toll office. She had extended freight hours by 2 hours in the evening. You're trying to beat his price with time, he said. I can't beat his price. You could lower the toll and run out of repair money before Boone finishes counting. Wade studied the new hours. 6 in the morning until 9 at night? If freight is waiting. You'll need help. I have help. Who? June looked toward her assistant, Charlie Moss, asleep beneath a cottonwood with his hat over his face. Wade followed her eyes. That man? He wakes eventually. I admire your confidence. I don't. Wade almost smiled. The next morning, his wagons began arriving in groups instead of all at once. 2 at 7, 3 near noon. The last pair after supper. June crossed the first group without a line forming behind them. By the 3rd day, she understood what he was doing. You're spacing the freight. Wade leaned against the toll office wall. You said the ferry loses time when too many wagons reach the ramp together. I didn't ask you to change your whole route. No. Then why are you? Because standing around complaining about a bottleneck doesn't make it wider. June looked at him. That almost sounded helpful. Don't repeat it. The trial book improved. 9-minute crossing. 10. 11 with a stubborn mule team. 8 minutes empty on the return. Boone appeared every few days without warning. He checked times. He checked the posted load limits. He inspected June's maintenance entries and spoke to freight crews when she was not near enough to hear. He gave her no encouragement. June respected him for that. At night, the bells continued. One from the east, one from the west. Sometimes Wade had a reason to be there. A late wagon, a broken harness, a crewman camped near the western sheds. Other nights, June could not find any reason at all. Still, midnight came. She rang. He answered. On the 11th night, June finished the east machinery check early. She stood beneath the bell with the rope in her hand. Across the river, Wade's lantern was already hanging outside the western cable house. She waited. 11:59. The river slid black beneath the stars. Then midnight. June pulled the rope. The eastern bell rang. The western answer came before the first note had fully faded. June stared across the water. A lantern lifted once in Wade's hand. She lifted hers back. That was all. The next afternoon she heard the sound. A faint, uneven knock inside the main hall housing. June stopped the ferry before the next load rolled onto the deck. Wade was bringing 3 supply wagons down the west approach. He saw her raise one hand. His crew halted. June opened the inspection plate. Grease coated the cable. At first she saw nothing unusual. Then she turned the wheel by hand. One section moved differently. Not broken. Not yet. June wiped the cable clean with a strip of cloth and bent closer. Several inner strands had begun to flatten where the line passed through the lower guide. Wade came across on the empty ferry. What is it? Where? How bad? I don't know yet. He crouched beside her but did not touch the cable. Can we run tonight? June ran her thumb along the edge of her measuring rule. Her trial book was 12 days old. They were ahead of Boone's required average. Price's low rates were already taking light freight away. 2 days closed could erase nearly everything Red Mesa had gained. Wade waited. June measured the damaged section again. Then she stood. No crossings until I replace it. Wade looked at the waiting wagons. How long? 48 hours, if nothing else is wrong. His eyes came back to hers. You're certain? No. That answer surprised him. June pointed at the cable. I'm certain I won't carry loaded wagons until I am. She walked to the operating board and wrote, "Closed for cable repair," in thick black letters. Harlan Price arrived less than an hour later. He did not mock her. That somehow made it worse. He read the sign, opened his notebook, and wrote down the time. Shame, he said. June kept working. Price looked toward Wade's freight. My road is open. Wade said nothing. By sunset, 4 wagon strings had turned upstream. Wade's 3 remained in the yard. His employer's messenger arrived after dark. June was removing the damaged cable section when Wade stepped into the cable house holding a folded instruction. You should go, she said. He looked at her. You don't know what it says. I know your employer. Wade unfolded the paper. Route all freight through Price until Red Mesa proves reliable. Failure to maintain schedule will be charged against my contract. June went back to the cable. Then go. No. Her wrench stopped. This is my risk, Wade. I know. You already helped me with scheduling. You don't owe me anything else. I know that too. She looked at him. Then why are you still standing here? Wade removed his gloves and folded them over his belt. Because I can move most of tomorrow's freight after you reopen, if I split the teams and run late. Most. And the rest? I answer for it. June stared at him. That's foolish. Possibly. Your employer can replace you. Possibly. I'm serious. So am I. He took a lantern from the wall. I'm checking the Western Guide before dark. Then he left her there with the damaged cable, and no argument left that did not involve telling a grown man he was forbidden to choose his own cost. They worked until nearly midnight. June stayed on the east side. Wade crossed to inspect the Western Guide and never returned. At 12, June stood under the brass bell. There was no freight scheduled, no safety reason for the signal. She pulled the rope anyway. One note crossed the Pecos. Silence answered. June looked toward the western darkness. Perhaps Wade had finally taken Price's road. Perhaps he had changed his mind. Perhaps he had simply gone home. Then the western bell rang. A lantern appeared beyond it. Wade was walking down the landing toward the cable house. By morning, his employer would know he had stayed. Wade Mercer lost part of his freight bonus before breakfast. The message arrived folded inside his employer's account sheet, delivered by a rider who did not bother getting down from his horse. June saw Wade read it beside the western shed. He folded the paper once. Then again. He put it inside his coat and walked toward the ferry as if nothing had happened. By noon, the new haul cable was seated correctly. June ran the ferry empty twice before allowing a wagon onto the deck. Wade stood beside her during the second test. "Feels smoother," he said. "It is smoother." "Then we run?" June checked the watermark, the guide wheels, and the fresh cable tension. "We run." The first freight wagon crossed at 1:16. By sunset, they had moved every delayed load except two. Wade divided crews, changed team order, and sent the lightest wagons first, so unloaded teams could return faster. He ate standing beside the west ramp. June ate nothing until Charlie Moss handed her half a biscuit after dark. At 9:30, the final loaded wagon touched the eastern landing. Wade checked his watch. 14 hours. "You should sleep." "You should eat." "I did." "That biscuit?" It was substantial. It was half a biscuit. June looked toward the cable house. "Your employer fined you." Wade became still. She had known the moment she saw his face that morning. "How much?" "That isn't your concern. It became my concern when you stayed." "No." June turned toward him. "No?" Wade removed his gloves. He folded them over his belt. "That is exactly what you keep doing." "What?" "Deciding which costs other people are allowed to choose." June's shoulders straightened. "I closed the ferry." "Yes. You lost money because of it." "I lost money because I decided not to take Price's road." She said nothing. Wade continued. "You told me what the risk was. I understood it. Then I chose." June looked toward the Black River. She knew what he was saying. That did not mean she liked hearing it. The next morning, she placed $12 on the western toll desk. Wade found it before the first freight run. "What is this?" "My share." "Of what?" "Your lost bonus." He looked at the money, then at her. "No." "Wade." "No. You lost it because Red Mesa closed." "I lost it because I stayed." "You stayed for the ferry." "I stayed because I thought staying was right." "That distinction doesn't put $12 back in your pocket." He pushed the money toward her. June pushed it back. Wade did not touch it again. "If I take that," he said, "then I didn't choose anything. I sold you 2 days. That is not what happened." "Then stop trying to make it what happened." June's hand rested beside the coins. For several seconds, neither moved. Then she picked them up. Wade nodded once. "Thank you." "I'm not thanking you." "I know." She put the money back in her pocket. The trial resumed. By day 21, Boone's board showed Red Mesa only slightly behind its required average. Price's road still carried more wagons than before, but some freightmen had begun returning to the ferry. They trusted posted times. They trusted June's load limits. More importantly, they trusted that closed meant closed for a reason. June did not mention that to Wade. She did not need to. He saw it too. Something else changed. Wade stopped asking whether June wanted him to manage the West Landing. He simply did the work she assigned. June stopped checking every knot after he tied it. That change was harder. On day 23, a wagon loaded with cast-iron stoveplates rolled down the western approach. Wade stepped in front of it. "Stop." The driver pulled back. June was across the river. Wade crouched beside the left rear wheel. The outer rim had begun separating from the wooden felloe. The driver cursed. It crossed Price's road fine. It isn't crossing this ferry. You're not the operator. Wade looked across the river. June stood beside the east control wheel. She could hear none of the argument. The driver pointed toward her. Ask her. Wade looked again at the wheel. Then he stood. No. The driver stared. Wade said, unload half, replace the wheel, or take another wagon. You don't have authority. Wade's eyes moved to the painted board inside the cable house. West Landing. Wade Mercer may halt loading for safety. June had written it that morning. The driver read it. His expression changed. Wade did not smile. Unload it. They did. When June crossed 20 minutes later, she examined the damaged wheel. You were right. I know. She looked at him. Wade waited. June reached for her measuring rule, then stopped. Instead, she put it back in her belt. You didn't wait for me. You told me not to. I gave you authority to stop a load. Yes. I expected you to use it. Yes. June almost laughed. You're making this difficult. I've noticed. They loaded the repaired wagon before noon. That evening, the bells rang as usual. But June heard the Western answer differently. Not because Wade had stayed, because she had finally allowed him to stand somewhere she could not watch him and make a decision carrying her name. 3 days later, Elias Boone arrived with Harlan Price. Price carried his notebook. Boone carried nothing but his watch. June knew before either man spoke that something had changed. Boone stopped beside the operating board. Final evaluation is in 4 days. June nodded. That was the schedule. There's an additional condition. Wade came down from the freight yard. Price said, I requested one. June looked at him. At least you admit it. Price opened his notebook. Red Mesa's numbers are respectable because Mercer has been spacing freight. Commercial crossings do not get to choose perfect arrival intervals. Wade said, neither do roads. Price ignored him. Boone spoke. The county agrees the final test should reflect normal high-volume traffic. June's thumb moved across the edge of her measuring rule. How much freight? 10 loaded wagons. Continuous sequence. Normal commercial weight. Wade looked toward the river. June did the same. The Pecos had risen nearly 3 inches since morning. Snowmelt from the northern country had reached them early. Boone followed her gaze. Water remains inside your posted operating range. Today. The inspection is in 4 days. June said, we'll be ready. Wade waited until Boone and Price had gone. Then he said, you could ask for a delay if the river keeps rising. No. This isn't pride? No. What is it? June looked at the watermark. If Red Mesa only works when the Pecos behaves, Price is right. Wade considered that. If you halt the test, I lose time. If you reduce loads, I lose time. If you push too hard. She looked at him. I won't. He removed his gloves and folded them across his belt. If you stop a crossing during the inspection, I back you. Even if your freight is on the deck? Yes. Even after what staying already cost you? Yes. June held his eyes. This time, she did not tell him what he should choose. Then we do it properly. That night, the river rose another inch. Near 11, June marked the new level on the post beside the east landing. She checked it again at 11:30. Higher. At midnight, she stood beneath the brass bell. Across the Pecos, Wade's lantern burned beside the western house. June pulled the rope once. The eastern bell sounded over the rising water. Wade answered immediately. Then, after one heartbeat, the western bell rang a second time. June's hand stayed on the rope. 2 rings were not part of the safety code. She stood beneath the bell, listening while the Pecos climbed toward morning. By sunrise, the Pecos had climbed another 2 inches. June stood at the east landing with Boone's inspection sheet in one hand and her measuring rule in the other. 10 loaded wagons waited beyond the freight yard. Harlan Price stood near the toll office with his notebook open. Wade brought the first pair down the western approach. "You still inside your limit?" he called. June checked the mark. "Inside." Boone clicked his watch. "Begin when ready." The first two wagons rolled aboard. The ferry groaned under the weight, but the deck settled evenly. June watched the guide wheel, cable angle, and brown water pushing against the hull. 9 minutes later, the first load touched the east ramp. Boone wrote the time. The second crossing took 10. The third took 11. By the fourth run, June could feel the river changing. The current pressed harder. The ferry reached the landing at a sharper angle. She checked the watermark again. Half an inch higher. Wade came beside her. "Still good?" "For now." The next freight group carried heavy machine castings, flour, and replacement stove plates. Wade read the manifests. 2 loads. June looked at the river. 3. Price closed his notebook. "That puts her over the county time." Boone did not look up. "The operator decides." Wade studied June. She did not explain. He removed his gloves and folded them over his belt. 3 loads, he told his men. One driver frowned. "We can carry it in 2. "Not today." The men began shifting freight. Price stepped closer. "Mercer, your delivery schedule is already under review." Wade lifted a crate. "I know. You missed the depot window. You may lose your route." "I know that too." June looked at him. He simply moved the crate to the third wagon. The first reduced load crossed cleanly. The second took 12 minutes. Halfway through the third, the ferry drifted downstream harder than before. June adjusted the brake. The cable answered, but slower. "Wrong. Hold your teams." Wade stepped forward. "What do you see?" "Not enough yet." June eased the ferry toward the landing instead of fighting the current. It touched timber with a hard bump. One mule shied. Wade caught the lead line and steadied it. June went straight to the water post. Another inch. Boone joined her. "You have 4 wagons remaining." "I know. If you finish inside the current schedule, Red Mesa meets the county average." "And if I don't?" "That is part of the evaluation," Price said. "The road is open." June ignored him. She checked the cable tension and studied the remaining freight. Single wagons. A murmur moved through the crews. Price smiled. "You cannot make the time that way." "No," Boone said. "You understand?" June put the measuring rule back into her belt. "Yes." She turned toward Wade. Single wagons. No exceptions. His employer's last depot load sat third in line. If they moved one at a time, he would miss his window. June waited. Wade picked up his gloves. "Single wagons," he said. The next crossing took 13 minutes. The one after that took 14. The 9th wagon crossed safely. By then, Boone's required time had passed. Price stopped writing. June could still complete the inspection. She could not win it on speed. The 10th wagon was Wade's. He walked it onto the deck himself. Halfway across, the current struck broadside. June released tension, let the hull angle downstream, then drew it back slowly. Wade watched her hands. He did not offer advice. The ferry reached the east landing 3 minutes slower than any crossing that day. June locked the brake. The final wagon rolled off. Boone closed his watch. Price shut his notebook. "The standard was clear," he said. "Yes," Boone answered. Price looked at June. "You missed it." "Yes." Boone opened the inspection sheet. "You missed the target freight time. You also reduced loads when conditions changed, closed for cable wear before failure, posted every delay, and completed the inspection without an unsafe crossing." Price's face tightened. The county did not ask which route could move freight fastest on one afternoon, Boone said. It asked which operation could be depended upon. He signed the sheet. Red Mesa Ferry retains the county freight contract for the next operating year. June stood very still. Wade looked toward the river and let out one slow breath. Price put his notebook away. "My road stays open." "It should," Boone said. Price looked at June. You earned the crossing. I know. He gave a small nod and left. By dark, the landing had emptied. Wade's depot load was late. His employer had sent no answer. June found him beneath the east bell, tightening a loose bracket. You missed your window. Yes. You may lose the route. Maybe. And you're repairing my bell. It was loose. June leaned against the post. Last night you rang twice. Wade stopped. That wasn't code. I know. What did it mean? He set down the wrench. I got used to hearing your bell before I slept. June looked at him. The night you closed the ferry, I started toward Price's Road. I made it halfway. She said nothing. I turned around because I knew midnight was coming. The Pecos moved below them. Wade looked directly at her. I can't sleep without you. June's eyes filled before she could answer. She pressed her lips together, then held out her hand. Wade took it. If you intend to stay beside me, she said, the morning inspection starts at 5. I already planned on it. A short laugh escaped her through the tears. An hour later, they crossed to the western landing with a toolbox. Together they unbolted the second brass bell from its post and carried it back across the dark Pecos. They mounted it beside June's bell on one heavy timber beam. June pulled the first rope. Wade pulled the second. The two notes sounded together over the river. Then they set the tools beneath the bells, opened the maintenance book, and began tomorrow morning's list side by side. If you'd like more Western stories where trust is earned, one hard choice at a time, subscribe and leave a like.